Hi everyone, thanks for joining me. You're watching In Deep on the Delta. This is the weekly fishing report for the week of August 25th. Before we get into the report, I'd like to give a big shout out to Jeffrey. And Jeffrey caught his PB this week. He got a 9-pounder. He sent me in a picture. The picture was kind of foggy, so I didn't put it up in the opening. But I wanted to make sure I gave a shout out to Jeffrey for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's his PB. It's a 9-pounder. Sent in a report, got it off the bank, and he also talked about being out there at the change of light. So I know that catching a 9-pounder is difficult. Catching a 9-pounder off the bank is difficult. That's probably a fish of 25,000 cast. And I also know that Jeffrey's putting in his time getting out early in the morning. I think it was a morning change of light bite, but he's getting up well before dark, and he's putting in his time and his effort, and a guy like that needs to be commended. Even though I didn't get your picture up there, Jeffrey, I commend you, and I hope you get another PB next week. Send me a little better picture and we'll get that one up on the opening. So anyhow, conditions this week. I've been out super early in the morning, like 3 a.m. Water temperatures in the central delta have been around 77 degrees. As we get these 100-degree days, we're getting into the low 80s. Nothing's changed there. Northern Delta, and we're talking about Northern Delta, meaning from we're talking about the Sacramento Delta, from Rio Vista up to, we'll just call it Liberty Island area. That water's 5 to 7 degrees cooler than what it has been down there. There might be one of the reasons why the fish are a little more active up in the northern part of the delta during the summer months. Water clarity, about 5 feet. Everything's looking really good. Even I've hit some water clarity probably 8 or 10 feet. The water clarity is really good. As these windy days, calm down and we don't have as much boating activity that's stirring up the water clarity tends to get a little better. And we'll talk a little bit about that. One thing you might want to do to catch a few more fish or catch a few bigger fish. And that's been the key the last month or so. Everybody seems to be catching fish, but everybody's crying about, I'm not saying crying, but they want to get bigger fish. Everybody's catching fish, but they're just not consistently catching the fish over, I'll say, 3 or 4 pounds. Now, we did have a tournament on the Delta last week. I think it was about a 70-boat tournament. It was a 6-hour tournament, and it was a 3-fish weigh-in. So they're only weighing in 3 fish, 6 hours. And the top guys did pretty darn good. I think 18 or 19 pounds won it. So it was like first place was 18, second place was 17 something, third place was 16 something. So when you figure that out, that goes to 18-pound limit, 3 fish. That's a 6-pound average. Give those guys 8 hours, they probably got close to 25 or over, and that's a good sack. The top guys did well, but the general field, from what I gathered, just did not do that well. Everybody caught fish, but a lot of bags were, in that 10-pound class or under. So even the guys, and I know there were some really good tournament anglers in that field. Even good tournament anglers are having a tough time getting bigger fish. And we'll talk about how it's just going to be that way. We're in the summertime, and this is kind of, we'll call it the summertime doldrums. As we get into fall and the water temperature starts cooling off, we're going to get a big bite out here, and the bigger fish will start perking up a little bit. So stay tuned. It's coming up. Right now, you're just going to have to deal with catching a lot of fish. If you watch the Bobby Barrick report or interview that I did, Bobby kind of talked about how these fish are spawning throughout the year, and I think that is becoming more and more of the fashion here on the Delta. And why that's important is, where we used to have a huge spawn in, let's just say, April, May, and June, there was a short period of tough time when all of those females were recovering, and we're having the same situation. People are catching a lot of fish, but not the big fish. And then all of a sudden, the big fish start biting, and the summertime bite was on. Well, I think what's been happening the last, I'll say, 5 years is the fish have been spread out in their spawn. So we continually have females that are spawning, recovering, are in pre-spawn, spawning, and post-spawn. So we still have females here in August that are recovering, in a post-spawn situation. So we don't have, it's kind of a slow burn where we always have bigger females recovering from spawn, and there's always people catching big fish, but it's not that big slug of fish where it seems like overnight, after we've had a major spawn and all of those females recover, we start catching a ton of big fish. It just hasn't been happening. What's happening now is we're still getting a lot of fry garters. There's a lot of fry in the system, and we're getting those males that are 1 to 2 pounds chasing faster moving baits. I've got a lot of reports that guys are throwing chatterbaits, they're throwing paddle tail swim baits, they're throwing crankbaits. My partner Ted, who is out at least every other day on the Delta, he has been fishing from Frank's Track down to the Calaveras River. This week, his most consistent bait has been a crankbait. And I haven't heard that in the last couple weeks, but that's telling me that he's moving a faster moving bait. And he's not getting big fish, by the way. He's getting fish 1 to 2 pounds every now and then. He'll pick one up, a little over, but same thing as everyone else. But he's getting action, and they are chasing that crankbait. And those are probably the fish that are fry guarding. So it's just part of the deal here. Now, you guys know that I love fishing after dark. I love fishing the change of light bite. I've been out super early, like at 3 a.m. in the morning, and fishing till about 10 p.m. in the evening. The last couple weeks, I have been pretty darn consistent on getting at least a couple of big bites, and I'm throwing big baits, and that's what I'm looking for. 1, 2. If I get 3 bites in a session, a 2 or 3 or 4 hour session, that's a good day for me. This week, I'm getting the bites, but they're not big fish. Even though I'm using 8-inch swim baits, I'm getting fish that weigh, I'd say my average fish is 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds, and I just haven't got a big bite on a big swim bait. And for me, that's okay. I'm retired. I can come out anytime I want. I can stay out for 2 hours. If I don't catch a fish, I go home. I know I can come out tomorrow and try it over again. Maybe for you guys that are fishing, once a week, that's not going to do it for you. So my suggestion is, don't worry about catching the bigger fish. Go out and fish your fun baits. Maybe take a spinning rod out and throw a fluke or a drop shot. You're going to get a lot of fish between 1 and 2 pounds, and you always have a chance of getting a bigger fish in that 5 or 6 pound range. But at least you're going to go out and you're going to have fun. You're going to catch fish. I have also got a lot of reports of guys punching, and I talked to Rob from out at the Bass Hole last week. Rob deals with a lot of tournament fishermen, and he's saying the same thing. A lot of guys are punching. They're looking for big fish, but even when they're punching, they are catching that 1 to 2 pound fish, a lot of dinks. My suggestion would be, for the guys that are thinking about punching, getting out, and maybe you're not real proficient at punching, punch smaller baits. Keep the skirts off. I tend to catch bigger fish when I'm punching with a skirt, and maybe a 2 or 3/0 hook with a standard size craw type of bait. What I would suggest is, number one, staying to about an ounce and a quarter, going down to a 1/0 hook with an appropriate size bait. Do not use a skirt, and keep everything in green pumpkin, black and blue crawdad colors. And you also might want to try using about a 3 or 4 foot section of 20 to 25 pound fluorocarbon leader. I know I guess 2 or 3, 4 years ago now, there was an FLW tournament won out here, and I forget who won it, but his key to success was he was punching, but because the water clarity was so clear, he decided to use, I think he was using a 25 pound test fluorocarbon leader, and he thought that that's what was the difference that put him up in that top spot. So with this clear water, throw smaller baits, maybe even try some fluorocarbon leader. A lot of the fish that are being caught are on the outside edge of the vegetation that you're punching. So if you're not really, in tune with punching yet, fish the outside of the vegetation. It's easier to get your weights through. The vegetation on the outside is usually a little more broken up, and you can get your bait through the vegetation and spend more time fishing, less time tangling up. There's obviously some big fish way back in there, but that stuff is harder to punch. So there's a few tips for punching that may help you get in the game. And with punching, you got to do it. You got to take your lumps. You got to catch fish and get some confidence before you can really just sit on that technique all day long and really go for the bigger fish. So with that, I will say the high outgo tide has been the tide that most everyone has been talking about. If you're out in the morning, there's two baits that have come into play the last couple weeks, and they are the whopper plopper and a chatterbait. The whopper plopper kind of fell out of fell off the map for a couple of years. 4 or 5 years ago, everybody was throwing them, and I think they had a little dip for some reason. People stopped catching them on them, but boy, they're catching them on whopper ploppers now. So if you get out early, try faster moving baits, whopper ploppers and buzz baits. If that's not doing it for you, go directly to a small popping bug and fish it slower. You're going to get some bites during that change of light period. If you're fishing during the course of the day, if you want to catch a ton of fish, throw on a drop shot, a wacky rigged worm, fish it on the edge of the hyacinth. You're going to catch fish. Punching and frogging, always good. There's still a lot of people catching fish on frogs. A lot of the bigger fish have come on frogs. That's another thing that's going to pretty much remain throughout the summer. If you want to catch big fish, put a frog on and stick with that frog. But again, if you go back to that Bobby Barrack review, that can be a lonely game. You're going to go a long time in between bites, and if you're just looking to get your rod bent, the frog's probably not the way to go out here. On an up note, we're going to have a no moon. Now, everybody talks about a full moon, but full moon, it's straight above our head, we see it. No moon, it's down below us. It still has the same gravitational pull, whether it's a full moon or a no moon. Why is that important? Because the gravitational pull of the moon affects the tide. So what that means is this next week, I think Saturday we have a no moon. I will probably be out all night fishing that for a big fish, and I'm going by the old Matt Allen analogy that the biggest fish in any body of the water are going to be caught after dark with no moon. It's not on the full moon, it's a no moon. That's coming up Saturday. We also, because of the no moon, we have a much higher tidal coefficient coming up this week. We're going to have better tides. The fishing will pick up, I guarantee you. Starting today, throughout the next week or so, the tidal coefficients go from the 50s and 60s into the 80s and 90s. We're going to have more tide flow, more water movement. That will kick up the bite. So with that, I thank you guys for watching. If you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe, and until next time, I'll see you guys on the water.